since you liked my last video, that video about Trump. I got over 1,000 views, but only 1 likes. And that's why we're moving on to the next video of a great man in a small man's body. Now let's go. So welcome to Russia. The country where the winters are as cold as democracy and leadership is eternal. Literally. Here, Vladimir Putin is not just a president. He is an institution, a myth, and probably an official religion by now. This is the story of how a man went from being a grey KGB agent to becoming a living tsar, complete with bear hunting, propaganda, and a love of invading their neighbors. Let's get started and take a look at it here. Let's begin. Vladimirovich Putin was born in 1952 in Leningrad, or as we call it today, St. Petersburg, a city that's best known for its beautiful scenery. And I produced Putin. We say that Putin was an ambitious boy. He loved judo and dreamed of becoming a spy. That was about it. Who needs other interests when you plan to take over the whole world? Putin joined the KGB, the Russian version of James Bond. If James Bond was never laid back and always suspected that his martini was poisoned. He worked in East Germany during the Cold War, where he wasn't the best spy, but he managed to stay alive. And in Russia, that's apparently enough for a career. But here's the thing, Putin, he's like a shadow. No one notices him because he's suddenly everywhere. In 1999, he stepped down as prime minister under Boris Yeltsin, a man who was clearly just as good at choosing successors as he was at standing upright to 2 glasses of vodka. Putin took over as president shortly after. People thought he would be a transitional figure, a kind of placeholder until something better came along. What they didn't know was that Putin wasn't just planning to stick around. He was planning to take over completely. As president, Putin quickly showed that he wasn't interested in just leading Russia. No, he wanted to own it. To do that, he needed 2 things: control and fear, and yes, perhaps, maybe a bear or 2, PR. Putin started by eliminating political rivals, controlling the media, and creating a new doctrine. If you're with me, you're with me. If you're against me, good luck finding a passport that works in another country. Soon, Russia was more than just a country. It was Putin's personal project, and he really liked it so very much that he indeed thought to himself, why exactly do we stop at just 2 terms after all anyway? I've just started having fun. But what is an autocrat without an image? Putin is just a man. He is a myth, a legend, a meme creator. One day he's on a horse, the next day he shows up on a submarine. He has built his own brand as the toughest guy in the room. And yes, sometimes the only guy in the room. It's not just propaganda. It's a lifestyle. Because Russia is no longer a nation. It's Putin's playground. But we have only just begun. Because in the next part we will look at how he took the word president and turned it into dictator light. Or maybe not so light, by the way. In 2008, Putin ran into a little problem. It's called the Constitution. This annoying law said that he could only be president for 2 consecutive terms. In the complex political landscape of Russia, it seems that for President Vladimir Putin, the established laws and regulations are often treated in a manner similar to how drivers in Moscow might view traffic light, as mere suggestions rather than strict rules to follow. So what was the solution? A creative interpretation of the transfer of power. Putin let his trusted henchman, Dmitry Medvedev, become president while he himself became prime minister. But let's be honest, Medvedev had about as much power as a fictional character in a Russian novel. During those years, Medvedev was officially called president, but the people knew better. He was more like a substitute teacher, while the real teacher, Putin, decided where the cabinet should stand. In 2012, Putin returned as president, but this time he had an ace up his sleeve, or rather a completely new constitution. It extended the terms from 4 to 6 years. Well, whatever it is he does, besides riding horses, I have no idea he's doing. Besides invading other countries, and it doesn't seem to be going so well either actually. He won the election, by a landslide of course, because in Russia there are only 2 options, vote for Putin or don't dare to vote at all. But what is a dictator without an opposition to destroy? To keep his opposition at bay, Putin did what he does best, eliminate threats. Political opponents disappeared, imprisoned, or perhaps you found yourself in a rather unusual situation, where you unexpectedly and surprisingly happened to get a cup that was spiked with something. Let's call it a mysterious and intriguing Russian spice. Now, with this unexpected and peculiar twist, I found myself able to drive a little bit more than I usually would. Navalny, one of Putin's most famous critics, survived a poisoning, but was later sent to prison for, and this is amazing, not reporting to a court while he was in a coma. It's like being sentenced for not paying taxes while you're kidnapped. Under Putin's regime, Russian media has turned into something that would make George Orwell jealous. The state controls almost everything, from news to weather and spoilers. Putin is always the sun in the forecast. The media builds up his image as a savior, a strong man who keeps the chaos in check. And if you dare to speak out, you might want to book a one-way ticket out of the country, or even better, start digging a bunker. People in Russia have two choices. Either you love Putin or you pretend to, and in both cases, it's best if you applaud longer than your neighbor. Putin loves to call Russia a democracy, and on paper it might look that way. But there are choices, political parties, and a constitution. But this is kind of like calling a North Korean election exciting. There's only one winner, and we know who that is. So while the Western world continues to criticize Putin's grip on power, he can calmly sit back and think, you can call it whatever you want. I call it Tuesday. Putin has indeed taken the truly remarkable art of staying in power to an extraordinary level that makes other autocrats nod with envy. But we're not done yet. In the next part, we're going to dig deeper into how he not only controls Russia, but also uses geopolitics as a personal board game. So spoiler alert, no one likes playing against Putin. 2014 was the year when Putin decided that the world needed a bit more chaos. Enter Crimea. Officially, it was about protecting Russian citizens. Unofficially, it was about showing the world who's in charge. It was a masterful maneuver. Putin sent in soldiers without flags and pretended he had nothing to do with it. It was like that. Steal someone else's car and say that since it's parked in my driveway, technically it's mine. After Crimea was annexed, a referendum was held there, and over 95% of the votes were in favor of becoming part of Russia. Because it is clear that an occupied region votes to remain with the occupiers. It's like asking someone in a hostage situation if they're happy with the service. But why settle for just one country when you can meddle in other people's conflicts too? He managed not only to save Assad, but also to cement Russia's place as a power player in the Middle East. For Putin, it was never about solving problems. It was about creating new problems. Putin's relationship with the West can be described in one word: gluttonous. For every station from the USA or EU, he responds with a shrug and new partnership with China. Therefore, you have been dumped and immediately started dating X's worst enemy. For Putin, sanctions are nothing more than the West's version of a disgruntled Twitter post. It doesn't affect him personally. Just the 99% of Russians who can't afford their next meal. But perhaps Putty's most ingenious move is his invisible army, hackers. Why send tanks when you control the whole world from a basement room in Moscow? In recent years, Russian hackers have been accused of everything from influencing elections to stealing trade secrets. And when the world points a finger at Russia, Putin just smiles and says, "We never hack." By the way, nice new president you have there. But Putin's important love story is with Russia's neighbors, Georgia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan. The list just goes on. It's like he sees all of Eastern Europe as his own monopoly game. And guess what? Everything has already been bought by him. Thank you for listening, dear viewers. Remember that no matter what happens, life is always a little better with a bit of humor, a little sarcasm, and a reminder that the world is sometimes just as crazy as it seems. See you next time.